Welcome to the Rex Andrews Show. Glad to have you. If you are a first-time listener, welcome to the conversation. The Rex Andrews Show is all about people, life stories, interesting stuff, interesting topics, interesting people. And I just have this slogan I throw out all the time now is common sense is not extinct. It might be on the endangered species list, but everybody that we bring onto the show, they have something in common. They're really common sense type people. And they're everyday people, just like you and I, but they're doing amazing things. So we'll talk about that today. Great guests coming up. For those who are returning listeners, thank you very much because of your listenership and our great guests. We have cracked the top 10% of the fastest growing podcasts on the planet. And we currently have listeners in 32 countries on 6 continents. And if I could afford to buy all the penguins smartphones and then figure out a way to charge them down there, we'd probably have listeners in Antarctica. So house cleaning real quick. If you don't like the platform you're listening on, don't worry. We're distributed on 23 different podcast distribution channels. So wherever you get it or find a new one, please find us on social media, Rex Andrews Show. And most importantly, come to the website. And the reason I tell you to do that at rexandrewsshow.com is because we have great guests on, but we don't cover everything in their stories. I mean, their stories are too big and in the time that we allot for. So go there, you're going to get their bios, you're going to get updates, information. It's just a good place to catch the rest of the story. So sort of the Paul Harvey line from those who remember Paul Harvey, and there's the rest of the story. Okay, so with no other fanfare, heading into our interview today, excited to have her on the show. Amazing story. I think you're going to be very interested in this one. And so let's get this party started. So we're going to introduce her. She's a mom, okay? A really important role. And we all respect and love our moms. Well, at least we hope we do. She's an educator. She's an author. And in fact, she has 3 new books coming out, 2 that she's written and 1 she's in. So that's pretty interesting. A really dynamic personality. So I'd like to welcome to the show, Colleen Reagan Noon. Now, see, she's got 3 names. I can only afford 2. So glad to have you, Colleen, and welcome.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for having me, Rex.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So for those who might be playing along, multitasking with us today, Colleen, can you give us out your website or social media links, any of those or all of those real quick, so they can follow along and learn more about you as we're having our conversation?
Sure. You can find me on my website at thewisewomenbookco.com. And you can also find me on Facebook at Wise Women Book Collective. And don't let it fool you. I do work with men too. It was just a catchy name. Had to grab it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to bite my tongue on that one, Wise Women, because I'm always reminded on a regular basis I'm not. So, and it's from that side of the genders. So we'll unpack that today. Okay, thank you for sharing that. So what we like to do, Colleen, as you know, you've listened to some of the episodes, and for those who play along with us, it's all about the stories, and we are all accumulative of where we are today based on our experiences. So I want to dial back a little bit and help our audience understand your history a little bit. I mean, we would like to know where you were born, where you grew up, things. Now, don't worry about this list. It might be a little long, but I'll remind you. Things you were interested in as a youth. So maybe if it was sports or dance, theater, computers, shoplifting, it doesn't matter. We want to know the things that you were doing in your spare time. We want to know about your family. So if you have siblings, do you have siblings that survived your harassment, stuff like that? What your parents did when you were growing up, and if they still are with us, what they're doing today. That's always a big influence because sometimes that motivates people from a support angle or motivates them to say, I don't want to be anything like that. And then we'll hopscotch through your education and those types of things, and then we'll bring us up to date what you're doing. But of course, the most important thing, what we really want to talk about today in that journey is this amazing story that you have, okay? So, Colleen, take it away. Where were you born?
So I am from a small town called Marcellus outside of Syracuse, New York, and I'm 4th generation in that town.
Wow.
So my And not only that is my dad had a family business, still has it there, that he is the third generation. And now I have a younger brother who's the fourth generation running
that business.
So yeah.
All right. Okay. So we've got to stop and do a little plug there because there aren't a whole lot of fourth generation businesses. What's this fourth generation business up there?
So it's Reagan Companies. They do insurance and financial services.
Fantastic. That's so great. You're the first person I've ever run into on my interviews that has a business that's been in a family for 4 generations. That's cool.
It's an interesting story. My great grandpa started it right before the Great Depression hit, and then he passed away in the 1930s. And my great grandma ran it from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, all by herself, which is pretty cool for that time frame.
No kidding, a woman in business like that. Wow, that is cool. That's a great story. Okay. So growing up, what were the, siblings? Do you have some siblings?
Yes. I have an older brother and a younger brother. So I'm right in between the 2 boys.
So you're the sister sandwich, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Or as my younger brother calls me, mommy number 2.
Mommy number 2.
So if that will give you an idea of the type of sister I was.
Okay. Well, I had one of those too. I had one of those. I refer to a little bit different as the second boss of me. So
absolutely.
Okay. So how many different years in age between your siblings? So older, you, and youngest.
My older brother and I are 20 months apart, and we were only 1 grade apart in school.
Okay.
So he dated all my friends, and we were in a couple of the same classes. So that was always interesting.
Okay.
And then my younger brother is 4 years younger than me. And when we get to that part, I moved to Boston the same time he started going to college in Boston. So we were kind of there. We ended up there at the same time, which was really fun.
That's cool. Yeah. It's what a similarity. My sister's one is about almost 20 months difference between us, 1 grade ahead. And there were all kinds of rivalries in school and that kinds of stuff because there was a second set of eyes on you all day. You know, it was, yeah.
I was the second set of eyes on my older brother. I'm sure reporting back.
Exactly. I could not be doing nefarious things because it would always get back because it was not only my sister, but it was all of her friends too. Because look. So fantastic. Okay. What types of interests did you do? How'd you spend your spare time growing up?
I was in band. I played the clarinet for probably 13 years. And then I also was really into theater. I did all the acting shows that came through in our school and summer programs. And that was my core group of friends. And that's the person I was in high school and in middle school. And I guess I switched in college. I shifted gears, but growing up, that was really my thing was the band and theater.
Okay. I have to ask, cause I was sort of a multi-focused type of guy cause I was a lead in the school play in junior high. Were you ever a lead in one of the productions?
Yes, I was Hermia in Midsummer Night's Dream.
Okay. Unforgettable for me, but it is. We did The Egg and I was the father, and I have no idea what his name was, but yeah, that was the pinnacle of my acting career. That was it, ninth grade. That was all we could do. All right. So fantastic. All right. So not only you were a theater person, you were a theater leader type person. Okay. So that change, that was what high school was about too then, right? Theater and
yes. Yeah.
All right. In band, did you march or was it just, in?
Oh yeah. Okay. We were, so it was a small town. Yeah. So we were your everything band. We were your commencement band. We were your marching band. And so we had 2 parades in our town. We only have 2 parades a year and they are 2 weeks apart from each other. So we would practice around the track and, upstate New York, the first parade is in May. It's still pretty chilly. There's still sometimes some snow when we're practicing. But we did the marching band and that was fun to march in the parades.
Yeah, that was cool. We, in my high school, not that this matters, but I played football and we were terrible. My senior year, we didn't win a game. And we were always happy to have the band on at halftime and always praying that it went longer because we're not sure we wanted to get back on the field. But funny times there. Okay, fantastic. So you said you did a pivot in college. Where'd you go off to school? And it looks like you might have pivoted on some interests.
Yeah, so I got my undergrad at Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida. And
Okay.
when I showed up there, my dad said, he said, "You're really tiny, you're really loud. You should try out for the rowing team as a coxswain." And I had absolutely no idea what that was. And, next thing you know, I'm, the captain of the team. It took a couple of years, but like captain of the team, head of the community service for the team, and really threw myself into it. I was a coxswain on both the men's and women's team.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. How
Yeah.
funny. My nephew, Dylan, he was a amazing golfer, and he was down in Texas, and they lived in the Austin area. And then when he went to college over at Texas A&M, he did the same thing. He peeled off and went to the crew teams, and through his entire college career, he was a crew member, and it was awesome. It's a great sport when you follow it. It's really an interesting thing. There's a lot of individual effort, but it has to be in unison. So it's really interesting. And
Well, what's the best part about it is, think of every other college sport. You've had to do it since you were 6 years old.
right.
You can't just walk on to a team. And so rowing's just not everywhere. In most colleges, it's something you can walk onto your first day freshman year, your sophomore year. And so it really offers this unique ability for people who, either didn't want to compete in whatever sport they were in at the college level, or, had never really had a sport like me. I think I tried every sport, but never really stuck with it. And this was just so great for me to be able to walk onto it and be a collegiate athlete and, collect all sorts of medals from all those races we won.
Oh, that's great. Did you ever get up and were you ever rowing on the St. Charles River then? Because we used to go on that all the time when I lived outside of Melbourne.
So no, we were, I'm trying to think where we were most of the time in Florida if we weren't on our lake, but I don't think we ever made it over there.
There's a lot of water in Florida.
There is a lot of water.
Okay, so I guess with your personality, I don't think I have a hard time understanding that you were calling the shots on the row teams, right? So you're the one barking out the orders, huh?
Absolutely.
So you were the second mother to your youngest, and then you were barking out the orders on the crew team. That's fantastic. Okay, so you wrapped up college down there in Florida. What was your next stop?
So I moved up to Boston, and I got a master's degree in early childhood education and creative arts and learning at Lesley University in Cambridge.
Okay. Boston is an amazing college town. I love it. I've got a daughter that's in med school there at Tufts, so love to get back to Boston. Yeah,
I spent 12 years in Boston and Massachusetts, and that is where my heart is. That is really what I feel like is home.
Yeah, it's an amazing town, and there's so much history there. You can stop by a cemetery and see graves from the late 1500s and the 1600s and stuff, and all the unique architecture from centuries ago. From American century ago. I mean, it's an amazing town. I love it. And then the whole, there's 35 plus colleges there. It's just a young, vibrant, vibe that's in that community. Just absolutely love Boston.
Yes, I had a lot of fun there, especially too when I had first moved up. I was on the rowing team, and so we were doing some traveling for that, and it was just a lot of fun and a great place to be. And like you said, the history everywhere. I love history. And at one point, my husband and I lived in right in downtown Boston, and right in our backyard was the Tea Party Museum.
Nice.
So it's like this boat, and a couple times a day you'd hear them be like, "Throw it overboard." It was definitely very cool to be living so close to such a historic place.
Yeah, it's really neat. So where did you meet your husband? Was it at school then, or in business?
Oh, it was online.
Oh, really?
Online. Yes.
We have an online love affair. Second one I've on an interview.
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. So, man, that's an interesting dynamic. I haven't met that many people who have. So, how long did that take, and what was that process like?
I mean, online dating is terrible.
Yeah.
I got to a point where I'm like, I will barely talk to you. We'll meet for coffee somewhere, because like you can't tell who someone is online.
No.
And I would join. I'd do like 2 dates, and I'd be like, this is awful, and get off. But Boston there's so many young people there but it's not the best town for dating.
No.
So I didn't really know that at the time, but it just wasn't. And so I did, I moved up. I had a boyfriend when I moved up, but then we had broken up, and I spent a couple years kind of trying to figure out where to go next. And with my husband, I was about ready to quit Match.com for like the 5th time. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to put in here, you can put in criteria of like anything you'd want in a mate, from like hair color to eye color, height. I put everything in that I wanted in a spouse, absolutely everything. And 3 people came up. And 2 right away, I could just tell from the pictures. I was like, I'm not that attracted to them. But the 3rd one was him. And he looked a little bit like a jerk in all of his pictures. He was not smiling. He didn't look very friendly. And I was like, but I keep saying this is my ideal person. So I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go on a date with him. And couldn't be further from his pictures. As soon as I met him, he was just clearly like such a friendly, nice looking person. And that then kind of like the rest was history.
Fantastic. So you went on an interesting journey where some things went off the rails. So let's talk about that story. Okay.
All right.
So let a little bit of background from it, and then let's talk about the story and the outcomes and just this journey you've been on, because you've had some amazing success in your life with your family and some pretty hard downtimes too.
Yes.
Okay.
So I mean, that love affair with my husband is kind of where we start with this.
Okay.
So he owned a very successful business. So he was very wealthy. And so, we were living the lifestyle of, the multi-million-dollar condo in downtown Boston, and international trips and shopping sprees, and, getting my hair done on Newbury Street, which, Boston is like the fancy street. And so like, that was the lifestyle that we were living. It was similar to a lifestyle I grew up with. So it just kind of meshed nicely there. And we, we moved out, we had this big wedding in Vermont, this beautiful barn wedding in Vermont. And we moved out to the country, about 40 minutes outside of Boston, to this wonderful town. And we had this house that we loved with this gorgeous property and all these flowers. And we had our first child, and it was, we were those people and people still tell me this too, like that you see me on Facebook and I'm not even trying to brag about my life. I'm just posting what we're doing.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh my gosh, you've got the perfect life. You have everything. And it did. I felt like all of my dreams had come true. Shortly after my son was born, we bought a lake property in, there's a little cabin on it, but in our same town. And we were going to build this gorgeous lake house, and we had it all planned out. And it seemed like things couldn't get any better.
Wow.
Things were really going well for us.
So quite the storybook life. You had a very successful father, great business, go off to, private, very unique schools as far as that. You go there to Boston, you meet the knight in shining armor who sweeps you off your computer, and you've got this great story going. Okay, so some things started to fall apart. Let's hear about that.
Yeah. So when my firstborn was about 15 months old, and I was 12 weeks pregnant with our second child, my son had to go in for a surgery. It was a surgery we knew he was going to have pretty easy. But it was the day before. My husband tells me that he's addicted to pain pills, and his brother's going to take him to a detox facility. And, I don't even know what this means at this point. And I'm like, well, you can't go anywhere because our son's having surgery tomorrow. So you've got to stay here for this. And, my son and I went out for a play date. We came back and he was gone. And so I had to call my mom, because being pregnant, you can't be in the operating room when your child goes under. So I had to have another adult there to go under with him. And so it was kind of my mom and I sitting there like, what in the world was going on? Like, it was kind of the first we'd heard of it. I thought he was depressed, but I never kind of would have guessed pain pills. It was not even on my radar. And even when you hear pain pills, I guess initially I wasn't thinking full-blown opioid addiction. I didn't even know the term. It was after I get home from my son's surgery, a nurse from the detox facility calls me, and she says, I said, what's he even there for? Why is he there? And she said, your husband has an opioid addiction. And that was the first time I'd probably heard the term before, but that was really the first time that I had been aware of it. And, immediately hopped onto Dr. Google to figure out what in the world I was dealing with.
Okay. So a question for you. Had he had some surgeries or injuries or something where he had gotten those prescription? Was he getting those sort of black market? Where did he source this? Because that's an interesting story for most people who get addicted to opiates.
Right. So he had a wisdom tooth surgery years prior.
Okay.
And that was the first time he had them. And he said he knew right then that like at some point in his life, they were going to be like his go-to.
Okay.
And so it was years though that he wasn't doing that. I think maybe occasionally recreationally, but it sounded like there was no addiction. It was not something that was happening. It was not something I was aware of.
Sure.
But he had sold his business when was it? The summer before my son was born. So 2 months before our first was born, he sold his business for a lot of money. But this business was his baby, and it really hit him hard. And this ended up being his coping mechanism. And so it was, I don't know exactly how it started. He was doing it with his brother. It sounded like there were still, because they kept some employees on, they tried to start another business. It sounded like it was happening in the office. And yes, so there was, so it was a lot that was going on that I really had no clue about because he was going to work every day. So I thought he was starting up this other business and he was going to work and they were just getting high.
Oh no. Wow. What a earth-shattering moment for you to have him, run off, especially the day before your son's having surgery. That's crazy. Okay. So
yes, but I do have to say, when you're in that moment, it's not life-shattering because I didn't know enough for it to be life-shattering.
Okay.
It was like it was just like, oh, okay, like, well, whatever problem he has, like he'll just tough through it, and then like things will go back to normal.
Sure.
And so, I mean, it's strong denial, but in that moment, it still didn't occur to me that this fairy tale was over.
Okay. So how long was he in rehab?
So he initially did not go to rehab.
Oh, he did?
He went to a 3-day detox, and then he came out. And one of the best things I ever did was I tattled on him to his therapist. I had found him his most recent therapist, so I had her email address. And when this all went down, I sent her this email. I was like, did you know this was happening? What do we do? And she sent back a recommendation for a guy who does, it's kind of like the life coach for addicts. Is if you don't want to go to a rehab, this guy kind of walks you through what your options are. And this is kind of how he advertises it, because you think the person, the addict, is the identified patient. And so I think I'm like the hero in all this. This is kind of, is what's going on in my mind. And so what this guy really does though is he prepares the spouse for what's about to happen and like how to handle this. And so without this guy stepping me through this, I mean, I wouldn't have been anywhere near where I was. But so he was the one who got us both to realize that my husband had to go to a treatment center because he had not fully abstained when he had come out of the detox. He was going to some AA meetings, but and I was finding beer bottles hidden around the house, and so we knew that there was something going on. And so he prepared us for my husband to go to this great rehab in New Hampshire. And at the time, though, I was very pregnant. So that was really hard for me to be like, all right, I've got to give him 4 or 5 weeks to go to this treatment facility. But still in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this is a really hard thing to have him go away for 4 weeks, but he's going to be better when he comes back. So it's worth this 4 weeks of him being gone. Because I was still naive to the whole, if you want to call it a disease, I know people call it different things. I do believe in the disease model of it, but there's so much to it on both the patient side and, the spouse's side or the family side that I just wasn't aware of. And so I didn't seek any help for myself outside of this guy who, he was just like, I'm going to tell you how to respond. Every time your husband says something, this is how you respond.
Okay.
And it was great because, I was kind of prepared to hear things I didn't want to hear. and it really helped walk me through it, to have that person by my side. But he does his 5 weeks in inpatient rehab, and that was another interesting thing too, is we went to visit him. I'm very pregnant. We've got this little baby, still, who's not even 2. And I thought we were going to be the only people with kids there. And you show up and it's like family field day.
Oh my.
There was a woman with a 6-week, she was in there and she had a 6-week-old baby, her 6-week-old baby coming to visit her. There was so many people around my son's age, one of whom, the father of that little girl, passed away from an overdose shortly after we had all met them. But it was really eye-opening to see that this is happening in young families.
Wow.
And it was this, they all looked like it was like a country club too. Like they're wearing their Patagonias, and like, it was not who I thought when I thought of, oh my gosh, we're going to a rehab. Who's even going to be here at family visiting day? It was really eye-opening.
Well, there's probably a connotation that addiction is something of a blue collar, middle class, something like that it doesn't hit all walks of life. But I know that's not the case. It can hit anybody, right. any age, any race, any social economics, any profession. It's out there and it's everywhere. And when people face it like you did, it is eye opening. I have a family member that went through that and ended up passing away, and it's tragic, but you just see the impact on lives. It's crazy.
Yeah. And too, then once you're kind of in it, you're the person people come to. Yeah. And it's amazing just how prevalent it is. And we don't really know how prevalent it is because no one's talking about it. Yeah. And so I told no one. I mean, my parents knew, but that was it. No one in my neighborhood had any idea that this was going on with my husband. Because it's not treated the same way as if you're like, my husband's sick with cancer. My husband's, sick with this. It's very different to be like, my husband's a drug addict. And so I did a lot alone. Just, couldn't ask for help because I felt like I had to keep this secret. And so when he finished his 4 or 5 weeks at rehab, I don't remember how long it was, he had to go to a sober living house. And so at this point I am a month out from giving birth. And I really was worried about him. It was 40 minutes away. And I was like, I had a C-section with my first baby. I wanted to try for a vaginal birth with my second baby, which, there's not really much more of a risk in that, but it was worrisome as we didn't really know how it was going to go. And I was like, I don't know when I'm going to go into labor. What if something happens? I'm home alone, way out in the country with a little toddler. What in the world is going to happen? And so that was really scary for me. But I was just coached so well of like, if he's got any chance, he's got to do this. Sure. And so he did it. And he moved back home on my due date, the day before my due date, which was the day before I went into labor. So thankfully the baby waited. And that was our first kind of welcome back home to him, was having this second child.
Wow. Okay. So not to fast forward too much, but he really wasn't compliant on the first dry out session. No. How did things go after the time in not only rehab but a sober house?
So he stayed sober until probably about November that year. So it was probably about from April to November. And once again, I didn't know until January, where he had this episode, which seemed almost like a psychotic break. And it was one of those where I locked him in a bedroom and I sat with my back against the door to make sure he didn't get out and get anywhere near our children. And I probably should have called, police or an ambulance or something. He wasn't aggressive, but he was just out of his mind. And that was when I started to suspect that something was going on. And so all of this time too, there's a lot going on financially. And I'm, still in the dark to most of it. But when he went away to rehab the first time, I discovered in his car months of unopened mail. He hadn't paid any of our bills in about 6 months. Yeah. But luckily at that time, there was still money. And so I paid those off, caught it up, and it was like, okay, we'll be okay. He's still got this other business that he started, and we're going to be okay. And it started becoming very clear that we weren't going to be that okay. The plans for the lake house were completely put on hold, and there was a lawsuit that was going on for something, and so there was just, I knew there was like a lot going on. But I've got a colicky baby and a 2-year-old, and I was just kind of in my own world. And when it did come out that he had used again, that was the moment. I know exactly where I was when I found out. I know exactly what I was feeling. And it was just everything that ran through my mind is, I'm going to lose my husband. I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to lose my entire life. I'm not going to be able to have the 2 more kids that I want to have. And that is what happened. But it took me that long to really realize that things were changing, like things were going to be different.
So let's unpack this a little bit, because I just want people to understand the emotions you go through. I understand what it's like. I had a business that failed, ended up losing a house and kind of stuff. Were you in a sense of denial still, or was it mostly fear, anger? What was it like when you found out that he was, back at it?
That was anger. And then that was when I finally broke down and started telling some people. Okay. Because I knew I just couldn't carry it anymore on my own.
That's a huge burden.
Yes. So I had 2 of my neighbors I reached out to, and then one good friend. And that one good friend, she said, I know exactly who you need to talk to. I'm going to set you up on a phone call with her. And so was there more part before I get to any more stories? Was there another part to that question there?
No, okay. Just wonder what your emotions are like, feelings, because when you have little kids, it's like you could be mad because you're betraying not only me but the kids.
Yes.
There can be some denial of, well, why is this still happening? There's just a whole myriad of emotions that can take place when somebody comes out of that second chance and then it didn't fix the problem.
Right. And at this point too, I'm still thinking it's a self-control problem.
Okay.
It's a physical dependency and self-control. Like, you went to the detox, you got off the physical substance. Now it's just self-control to stay off of it.
Right.
Because I had no idea what, all the layers of like what's there. And so I did not educate myself that first year, other than that man who kind of walked me through what to say and do. I did not educate myself at all on addiction. I just kind of went off my assumptions of just kind of, just my initial assumptions of this is probably how it works. And he's just going to go through this and then he's going to be fine. And it still took me another 6 months from that moment to realize I needed to do something for me, and I needed to get educated around all of it, which was one of the best things I could do, but we'll get to there.
Okay. So what was your relationship how did this impact your relationship with him when he comes back out, starts using again, has that out of control episode? I mean, did this make you closer? Did it cause a lot of friction? I mean, I know there's some obvious answers here, but people react to stress in different ways. So what happened to your relationship with him?
So our relationship was, I mean, I think your typical codependent relationship in these situations where, I'm trying to fix him and he's placating me enough that he's going to do what I'm saying to fix him while he's meanwhile doing whatever he wants behind my back. And so it wasn't a healthy relationship because and I thought of myself as the person in the right and he was the person in the wrong. And so it was just this and then he's rebelling against that feeling. And so it was almost like a parent-child relationship. It was not a, mutual spousal type relationship.
Okay.
But it does. It does though bring you to definitely, I mean, where we kind of got later is a very different place. Is you end up, our relationship ended up like no relationship I've ever experienced before in my life. But at that time, I guess I'll try to think of how to explain how it ended up. But at that time, though, it was, it was not good.
Okay. So with all this happening with this, did he have other bad behaviors that surface? And I'm just trying to understand the story and the stress and stuff. Obviously, I don't have any judgment to anybody, but oftentimes when people get involved with addictions, they do other things. They're gambling, or they're infidelity, or they're involved in nefarious business deals and stuff like that. And so there's this whole other set of bad behaviors that are sort of, I don't know, just sort of companion behaviors that go along with addiction.
Yes. Yeah. One of his was just the business thing.
Okay.
Is he was definitely using that as almost like a self-sabotaging method of kind of, how big of a hole can I dig myself in this?
Yeah.
And so there was a lot that was going on there that was, I can't attest to any of the ethicalness of what was going on there. I don't know if it was all above board or not above board, but he was making very radical, very poor decisions with our money, with how much he was loaning to his business, with how much he was loaning to family members. There was a lot of that. I mean, that was just, very destructive as well.
Was he dealing with any mental health issues like depression or bipolar tendencies or anything like that?
So that was what was hard to figure out, is because he had always been told he was bipolar. He's been told he's ADHD. We brought him after his episode. That next day, I brought him into his psychiatrist's office, and they're like, "Oh, we got to get you on, really good bipolar meds." And so it's hard to tell sometimes when someone's in addiction of, is this the symptoms of addiction, or is this, an underlying mental illness? And that is kind of it's kind of just been, I'm almost undecided. I do believe that there is definitely, there's numerous different mental diagnoses there encompassing it, but it wasn't a clear cut, he has bipolar and that's why this was happening. It's never been determined if for sure he has that, but there is a lot of different issues that he does have in the mental health spectrum.
Well, fair enough. I understand all that. A little over 20 years ago, I was diagnosed as, at that time, was bipolar 2, hypomania, ADD. It was a mouthful. They sent me off to a psychiatrist, throw me on all kinds of meds, and it was a journey. Well, today things have changed in the DSM, so I'm still bipolar 2, but I'm undefined because they really don't know, but I do have some of those characteristics. But if you do have bipolar, some of those characteristics can be excessive risk taking, sort of the Superman thing of, I'll spend this money because I know this other's coming in and I don't really have control, but I have those types of things. And so one of the things that you're taught and counseled and they basically try to keep you under guardrails is, you don't ever want to do anything that can get you into addictive, because talk about throwing, gas on a fire. If you have bipolar tendencies and then you mix in addiction, it also often is a lethal and deadly combination.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So, you had a really interesting stew of behaviors that were happening with him at this point in time. Yes. So what was the next hop on this? I mean, you were riding an avalanche downhill, right? I mean, things were out of control.
Right. So he went away back to that same rehab. And I, here I am now alone with, an infant and a toddler. And I had a phone call with the person my friend set me up with. And this woman was really my first eye-opening in that he wasn't choosing to do this. Because I think that's very much the tone I had on this phone call with her, is like, I don't understand why he's choosing to do this. And she said, he's not. She said, his brain, it's now rewired in which he's got to protect this addiction, much like a mother is programmed to protect her child.
Yep.
And that for me was like this light bulb moment of like, oh, there's so much going on here that I don't understand.
Yeah, because when you have an addiction like that, people become almost like a mama bear of protecting their cubs. I mean, it's the behavior can be fierce. It can be horrible.
Yeah. Well, and the lying too. Some of the times when they lie, it's like, this is a blatant lie. Like, why do you think you're going to go away with this? Because they have to protect it. Their brain has just wired themselves to protect it. So she had, this woman had gone to a long-term treatment facility, which does co-occurring with mental health and addiction, which is really what we had wanted. And it was in Florida. And
Okay.
so we, so so at this point, our finances, by the day we're discovering worse things. And so my dad offered to pay for him to go to this treatment facility, which was not cheap, but thankfully, I mean, I'm so thankful to my dad that he did pay for him, because he was there for 6 months. And it did not, he did stay, I mean, he has stayed sober, but this was not even 6 months in a treatment facility that focuses on mental health and addiction. It was not a fix. He did not come out of that. He's back and great and ready to go. Which is one of the reasons too that I am out here and I am talking on these podcasts and getting my story out there, is because it's a long road. It is not a 30-day rehab and everything can go back to normal. This is a complete lifestyle change.
Yeah. So where did the avalanche stop on your finances? I mean, I know when I read your bio about going from a very well-off situation to almost rock bottom, where did that stop?
Yeah. So, I mean, it stopped, I think it was when his lawyer called me and he said, "You're not my client. I'm not supposed to be talking to you." But he said, "You need to get the last amount of money you have." At this point, it wasn't even that much out of any bank accounts you have. And you need to transfer it to your dad because everything's going down. You're going to lose your house. And like this guy, it was like 9 o'clock at night that this guy calls me.
Wow.
And he just laid it all out for me. And he's like, this is what's happening. And he said, "I need to talk to your dad." And so he even then, which thankfully, my dad was amazing through this entire thing. And then also thankfully for this lawyer though, really clued us into what was going on, because I still was under some false impressions. There were still some payouts due or owed because of the business he had sold. There was annuity payments, but there was loans and there was lawsuits and there was all this stuff that just
a mess.
sucked it all in. And so it was just very apparent that, okay, like this is all this, we have reached the end. Like this is kind of, I'm going to have to move. I'm either going to have to move home or I'm going to have to move down near to where my husband is, which at this point it had been 18 months since he had lived at home with us. And then somehow too, so we got our mortgage through a smaller bank in Massachusetts. And I think they don't like to have foreclosures on their, on their stats.
Yep.
So we hadn't paid our mortgage in a year and a half, and they still let us sell it instead of foreclosing it. Wow. So it was, I mean, that was so lucky who we got our mortgage through that they allowed us to do that. So we didn't end up with a foreclosure on our record. And then, there was some lawsuits for some things that he had, and I had weekly visits from the county sheriff showing up at my door to serve papers. He wasn't there, and I had to tell him he doesn't live here anymore. But that was really, that was just really hard to deal with. Because you're like, how is this my life? How is this my life? And the car that gets repossessed, and not only can it get repossessed nicely, but my brother-in-law had borrowed the car because he needed it for a couple days. And somehow during soccer practice with one of his kids, someone cracks the soccer ball, hits it, cracks the windshield. He then goes and he had his own things. He ended up bringing this car to a court hearing. He went right from that court hearing to jail. So the car, they come to repo the car, and it is in this parking garage in Boston, with like no way to get it, because he did not know he was going to jail. That was a bit of a surprise. So this broken windshield, and it's like the repo guy and I, while we're trying to figure out how to get this car to them, I mean, it's one of those points where we're just laughing. We are just laughing because it's like, I can't believe this is where my life is. Sure. Like, how in the world did I come from where I was just a few years prior to this? Like, we're talking about jail and repo and bankruptcy and foreclosure, and it was completely surreal, and it was so surreal. It was funny.
How was your okay, this awfully a huge amount of stress. Uh did that put more stress on your relationship and your marriage? I mean, he's gone for
Absolutely.
18 months. I mean,
Oh yes. I mean,
your kids
I
really didn't even hardly know him because he hadn't been
no,
around. Yeah.
no. I mean, yeah, I went to the divorce lawyer and I got some papers drawn up, and it just at the time it just didn't really feel right. So I had kind of put that off. We've been back and forth a couple times with the divorce papers. Do we do it? Do we not do it?
Yeah.
And yeah, I would like to say there's a happy ending there, or there's some closure there, but it's, right now it still kind of is what it is, and we live separately, and my children and I live together, and we are our own safe, secure family unit, but he's also their father, and we appreciate him so much as a person. And so whenever he is able to spend time, that's, we are happy to have him there. But I think that also really speaks to, we're now 3 years down the line, and he's still really struggling with, it's really hard for him to live with the kids. It's stressful for him. He's got to be really careful about his stress. And it's, like I said, it's not an easy fix. It's a whole lifestyle change. And we have had to really rethink how we view the world. Because if I were to view the world the same way I did 5 years ago, I mean, I'd probably jump off a bridge, because
Sure.
like by all standards, I'm a complete failure.
Right. So, from a perspective of, okay, you hit this rock bottom, you were able to keep the house, almost a virtual miracle. Okay.
Yeah. We did. Yeah, we did have to sell it, but
no, you did sell it, right? But at least you didn't get the foreclosure on that. What was the next step? Did you stay in that area? Did you go down to Florida? Did you go home? What was next?
So we did. My kids and I moved to Florida.
Okay.
So we found a house about 10 minutes away from where my husband is. And at this point too, for about the past year, I had been teaching parenting classes, kind of out of my house. And so the kids would go to bed. I'd teach birth and parenting classes in my living room to just local people in the community. But moving to Florida also meant I had to completely rethink what I was doing for my occupation, because it's very different having people in your house when you've been entrenched in the community for a while, and everyone knows someone, versus being brand new, and I didn't want to bring that. So that was something that was like another thing that was like, oh my gosh, like I feel like I've given up everything now. Is like we got here and there was just nothing. I had friends still up north, but a lot of those relationships were strained because I pulled away, because it was too hard for me.
Too hard to face it.
And so I came down here. I had no friends there. I have no family down here. We don't even know where to send the kids to school. I couldn't keep doing the job that I was doing in the way that I was doing it. And my marriage, which she was the only person we knew down here, was rocky. And so it was scary.
Okay. So you did some serious rebound. Now, let me ask this, because again, we're talking about your story today. You just said a little bit ago, he's still struggling, right?
Yes.
Okay. But you did some big steps to rebound. So tell me what you did to rebound, and, to get to a point where you're a publisher and an author of multiple books and stuff. You did some big steps. So what was next?
Yeah. Well, the very biggest thing I did, and the best thing I did, was I found Al-Anon, which is a 12-step program for friends and family of addicts and alcoholics.
Okay.
And what that did is, you go because you think it's going to tell you how to fix the person. Sure. But when you get there, you realize they're going to tell you how to fix you. And so this is where I really had to radically look at myself and my actions and how I lived and how I saw the world. And that is what really built me up to give me my confidence back. Because like we talked about, I was always that bossy girl. I was always in charge, and I had been reduced to a complete shell of myself. I didn't want to see people. I would barely leave the house with these two kids. And like, I didn't, it was just complete, total opposite. I felt worthless. I had, did not feel good about myself. And so for me, the first step, I had to fix myself. And, your first step you think is like, okay, I'll get money and then it'll all be fine. But the first thing I had to do was fix myself.
Yeah.
And then once I was able to do that, I was able to do anything, and I was able to face any of these situations. And so I got to Florida, and I was like, all right, I've got to figure out real quick how I'm going to support these two kids.
Yep.
So, so what are we going to do? And, 6 months after we're down here, COVID hits. And so I've now got, I finally had these kids in childcare, and then they're back home with me again. And so, because I was actually doing some parenting for, in substance abuse, for parents who were recovering from substance abuse, and doing some of that in sober living houses. And so then again, I can't do that. I've got to now shift again from what I'm doing because we were in COVID. And so I was like, I have to figure out what to do online. And at that point, I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to write this one book. I'm going to write this book, but I want to have other people write it with me. So I had been part of a multi-author book, and so I put together 22 other authors, and we wrote about our VBACs, which is a vaginal birth after cesarean. Okay. And that for me, it just clicked, and it just launched everything. And like from there, it has been like, I've just exploded, where it was like, I found, and I think this book really represents it too, is like that was one accomplishment I really wanted to have, was that specific birth with that baby, and the time in which he was born, and the turmoil that went on before and after his birth. But like, I had that birth, and for me, I think writing that book really kind of proved to me, like, kind of like that self-worth, and like that good stuff is still out there, and good stuff was still happening. And it just, I took that momentum and ran, and I fell in love with the book writing process and the book publishing process.
Sure.
And then I just kind of gravitated towards getting these people who've also been in traumatic situations, who want to write their story and share their story, and came to me, I think, because, I'm open with my story, and they realize I'm someone who understands what they're going through, and is going to understand how to help them get that story out there in the way they want it told, to help other people. So since then, I have, by the end of May, I'll have helped about 70 people become Amazon bestselling authors.
Fantastic.
And yes, and I've helped, other multi-author publishers get their books out, and it's just been such a blessing to have it all come together. But like I said, none of this would have happened unless I had taken that time to find myself, and to fix myself, and to refine that confidence.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. What was the big fix? I mean, obviously when we go together to fix ourselves, we try to fix several things possibly, but what was the biggest fix? I mean, what did you change?
Well, would you rather be right, or would you rather be happy?
Yep,
I think
got
that's
that one. That's
a big one.
I had a mentor when I was early on in my software career, and he would always say to me, Rex, would you rather be right or rich? So you pick the one. So right or happy works. Well,
yeah. The control that, that I can control this, that I have my 5-year plan, and it's going to go exactly the way my 5-year plan says. And who says that's, and one of the things too we talk about is your higher power's imagination is far greater than yours. I might set out this 5-year plan, but there's something even better for me out there. So why am I going to beat myself in the ground to follow this 5-year plan when I can just kind of be open to what comes along and embrace these different situations and see what I can find in them. And another thing too was just to pause, which has just been one of my biggest things, is to stop reacting to things and to pause and respond instead. Okay. And to really, and when I'm responding, is to think about, myself and my boundaries and what's actually on my plate versus what's on someone else's plate. Am I, reacting because I think I need to tell you what to do? Even if I'm technically right about what you should be doing, it doesn't matter. That's not my business. And so for me to focus it on me and say, I'm going to pause. I'm going to think about this. I'm not going to go rush around to all my friends and get everyone else's opinion, which I definitely did a lot of. And then really just kind of feel it in my intuition. I really dialed in heavily to my intuition, did a lot of meditating, which I still do, and find, what, I think about things now, and I feel what feels right for me. And I move towards those. And that's part of the big reason why we haven't gotten that divorce yet, is because I just haven't been been moved to rush that sort of thing. It's, it's probably going to happen sometime in the future. But I'm not in a situation where that needs to be dealt with at the moment. And so it looks crazy to everyone else. They're like, what in the world are you doing?
Yeah.
And for me though, I've found my inner peace. I am responding to kind of my inner compass. And so I feel really confident in what I'm doing. I've put up the boundaries in which any abusive behavior that did occur before is definitely not occurring now.
Sure.
And it's helped me. And too, whatever he does, I've set myself up in a place where I'm so confident in myself, and I'm so, I'm in charge of my own happiness, that whatever he does, it no longer really concerns me. As long as, there's nothing unsafe happening with myself or my kids, this is his life to live. And I'm going to focus on mine and living mine with the kids the best that we can.
Wow. So I quote this all the time, and it's kind of crazy to quote this person, but Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. So your situation is a punch in the mouth, because you had this storybook life and then things came off the rails and nothing ended up at that time, but you've been able to rise from the ashes, and, become this Phoenix story where you took that and parlayed that into a very positive thing. So you got a couple books on the horizon too. You were telling me off air.
I do, yes. So ones I've personally written in right now are a lot of the different multi-author books. So I have written right now about fertility that's going to be coming out on May 7th. And then I have one on home birth after hospital birth, which I did not have, maybe someday. And that one will be out May 21st. And then I've also, if you want to hear some different angles of my story, I've written about kind of a lot of what I talked about here in a book that's going to be coming out called The Younger Self Letters, and that'll be out in June. Okay,
fantastic. So what a journey. Looking back, what would you have done different?
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay. No.
Nothing is, looking, if I were to give advice to someone else, because I love where I ended up and I love every part of my journey, no matter how hard it's been, because it's been so character building. And I love the person I've become. But, if I were to give someone else who's going through the same thing in my situation, would be to educate yourself much earlier on, to realize that, everyone that you're not telling this about because there's so much shame and embarrassment, you think people are going to judge you. They're not. Because when you come out with it, they're just in your corner. And so that's what everyone keeps telling me. They said, we're Team Colleen, whatever you need, we got your back. And so that's what I didn't realize was, he might have an issue, but my family is here to support me and my friends where I'm at and where I need help, which I didn't realize. And so that would be and then two, to find people who this has happened to and connect with them and hear their stories and see where they have found their strength from. Because that, for me, that was completely life-saving, is to realize that other people have been through this and they have made it through the other side. And you go into an Al-Anon meeting and everyone's laughing, and you first show up and you're like, what are these people laughing about? They haven't been through anything as bad as me, and they have just done the work.
It's interesting when people finally come out and start talking to other people. It's amazing how many people out there have these types of situations going on in their lives. I've been in church leadership, and you think that there's these people who you see them on Sunday and they're just living the perfect life and stuff. And then you get the backstories on all these things, or what's going on really in things that's not at church and those types of things. And, the human condition is full of struggle. That's just the way it is, that's just the way it is. And so when you finally come and start talking to people, you realize I'm not alone in this. You're just not. I mean, it's everywhere.
Right.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, it's an amazing story. I really thank you for coming on and sharing it with us. It's something that's quite vulnerable. So you're pretty brave to be able to put yourself out there and talk about these things. Because again, it's difficult when you have those failures, whether your own or your spouse's or whatever. It's a really difficult situation to do that. So please give us your websites and social again, so that way people can find you. Okay.
Yes. So it's the wisewomenbookco.com is my website. And there you'll find information. I help people write solo books. I help them, if they've already written their book, do formatting and help them get it published. I help them become best-selling authors. And I also, too, if you're interested in writing in a multi-author book, you don't want to write a whole book, but are interested in just writing a chapter, I do those too, which you'll find on my website. And then on my Facebook group, the Wise Women Book Collective, there I just give all sorts of, it's a bunch of authors, publishers, people who can become authors, and I just give kind of all sorts of tips and tricks, and we all support each other when our books come out. So it's a really it's a fun little community that's just full of support, and I've been enjoying that.
Okay, so now the other big question that I throw out there a lot is, what's on the horizon a few years out? Do you have a vision of where you want to take everything you're doing?
There's no 5-year plan.
Okay. Living each day to the fullest. I get that.
Yes, but yeah, I mean, my vision is to just keep growing what I'm doing and expanding, because I so believe, I mean, the people I really feel connected to and helping get their books out there, like I said, are the people who have been through these traumatic issues, different, various different things. And how do we represent their story, and how did they get through writing it, which can be very difficult. It's very emotional to write about these things. And so supporting them through the writing, getting that out there, and then marketing it too, so it's getting to the right people. That's really what I love to expand on. And I'm hoping I can continue to grow and help even more people get those stories out there, because it's just all part of healing for both ourselves. It's so healing to share your story. But it's also, like, right now, there's probably someone out there listening who absolutely needed to hear what I say. And
Absolutely.
Even if it was only one person,
I'll guarantee you it's more than one. I'm guaranteeing it's more than one.
For me to share my story, and that is just why I'm out here. And maybe I guess not necessarily things I do differently, but that's why I'm so passionate about getting my story out there now, is because I did myself such a detriment by staying quiet about it and trying to keep that secret at all costs. And so this is definitely for me too. It's healing.
Fantastic. All right. So my very last question I throw out to almost all my guests, anybody who's a return listener knows what's coming. And so, everybody has this concept in the Western world of a bucket list. In fact, I have interviewed the bucket list guy, Trav Bell, down in Australia. You can find him at thebucketlistguy.com. It's episode number 60. If you want to just laugh, he's a character. He's a great character. But when it comes to bucket lists, we all have these things we want to do before we exit the world. Now, in the world of physics, because I'm kind of a big science guy and have some physics background, there's an opposite of everything. There's always a polar opposite of everything. So there's another list out there. It rhymes with bucket and starts with an F, but I'm not going to say that, okay? Now, this list is things that you don't want to do ever or won't consider. So I'll give you a couple examples, okay? And people who know and listen to the show know these. I don't share all of them. But one of them is I will never, ever do a Lakota Sioux sweat lodge again, okay? The immense heat, the immense humidity, the drumming and the chanting, it was just not my thing. Not going back to another sweat lodge, okay? It's an incredible story. In fact, I did a podcast on it, so check out the sweat lodge. That was just a horrible experience. Another one on my list, while you're thinking and listening about what might be on yours, I'm not eating sardines. I'm sorry, I'm not opening a can and have something that kind of looks back at me. Nope, I'm just not doing that. I'm not eating things with scales on it. So nope, sorry. So those would be a couple examples. What might be on your effort list, Colleen?
Okay, so you just had to go and bring this story out of me. You brought up that sweat lodge, and now I've got to tell my story of what I'm never ever doing again. So it's something called Cambo, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's frog poisoning, and it's a shaman who does it, and it's a long story how I ended up doing this. Might have to record this one on a podcast. That might be an interesting story, beyond your current story. Yeah. So anyway, go ahead. Yes. Yeah. And so they burn into your skin. They burn 3 marks, and then they rub the frog poisoning in. and then you throw up for 30 minutes straight, and then they rub it off, and then you're supposed to feel magically wonderful.
Oh my goodness.
I think it was worse than giving birth. And I will never, ever be doing that again. But some people swear by it. So, I'm not going to knock it too much. For me personally, it will not be happening again.
Okay. That might be added to my list, and I hadn't even experienced it. That's crazy. Okay. Anything else that just comes to your mind real quick?
Oh man. I don't know. I don't want to knock too many things off the list.
Sure.
You never know until
That's
you
right.
try. If that divorce does happen, definitely not getting married again. I'll have some babies on my own. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Yeah.
But right now that idea doesn't seem very appealing. But yeah, so I don't think there's anything else really that comes to mind.
Well, I'll guarantee you this. This is such a crazy question that the next time someone talks about a bucket list, you'll probably think about this conversation. So,
I definitely will.
Yeah. Okay. So listen, it's been great to have you on the show today, and I appreciate your story because there's so many people out there listening today that need to hear this. Okay. You don't have to go alone. You don't have to go through this thinking that it's a permanent situation, and you've been an inspiration. A lot of the stories that talk about are inspiring, and I think most all of them are, because success doesn't fall out of the sky on people. Success is often the result of enormous amounts of pain and struggle, and so and so that's to be commended. So thanks for coming on today, Colleen, and sharing your story.
Well, thank you so much for letting me share my story.
Okay. Well, until next time, and we might have to get her back on this frog burning thing. That might be an interesting episode. But we'll call this a wrap today, folks, for this episode. Don't forget to stop by the website so you can get all the information about our guests, everyone who's ever been on the show, and then a whole line of people that are up and coming. We usually keep about 30 in the queue. So lots of interesting people telling interesting stories, and we always learn something new each time. And just remember, common sense is not extinct. It might be on the endangered species list, but common sense is just not extinct. So until next time, I always say these things, be safe, but also be bold and make it a great day.